Welcome back to another episode of the Renaissance Room podcast. And the reason why I thought that it would be a really good idea to come on and do a pod rather than a video is because, conversations around these that center on more sensitive topics, more, just kind of like outright topics, I think that they should be handled constructively. And I think the medium to channel these conversations could be through podcasting or writing. But since I haven't really written much these days, I thought that it would be great to kind of come on and create a pod. So in today's episode, we are going to be talking about the byproduct of Black father abandonment and Black regression. And one of those products being single mothers, right? So simply put, Black men create broken homes, and then the byproduct is a single mother who has to take care of the child because, and so we're gonna talk a little bit about that. And we're going to talk about how for so many Black men, they turn a blind eye to this. And it's no different than you have like abusers in the church, right? Who turn a blind eye to someone in the congregation who they know is being abused by one of the church members. And the reason why people typically turn a blind eye to the abuse is because they are an abuser themselves, right? They are also someone who is, partaking in that exploitation. So we don't call out what we partake in, right? We don't call out the things that we participate in. That's just not how the game go, right? We don't want the spotlight to be on us. I thought about this as I was listening to a pastor of mine who had been such a prominent figure in my faith building and my faith strengthening years ago, but has now taken a huge pivot in their messaging, in their approach, and ultimately in their ministry. And I believe that pivot has been due to financial reasons, right? I don't really know what it's like to be in the church. I think to kind of have a ministry and have some type of idea that you're going to be like a millionaire or be like one of these mega churches is blatantly ignorant, quite frankly, and it's very irresponsible. And I think, to take that type of approach is to be someone who doesn't even understand like racism. And, I say racism because you got to understand a lot of people in the church, the education is typically around theology, right? It's not around real world issues. For a long time, the Black church has been, it's been an anti-advocate for a lot of the communal issues that we face within the Black community. And it's turned its back on our communal issues and on the fight to equality and justice, right? And so when I think about this and I think about, Black pastors and small ministries shifting in their prioritization of, liberating people and creating a safe haven, and that shift kind of being due to capitalism and, them prioritizing money over all things, it's due to ignorance. It's like a child watching TV in aspiration and in hope, right? Not realizing that these mega churches are being able to come in and do what they do because they're white. It's a white church. That's why they have more money. It's not that there's really nothing there, right? But when you grown up in a community that is anti-secular education, you won't understand that in the real world. And so what you think is we can get there, right? You have that on your vision board, and quite literally it's just not physically possible. And so, yeah, I've seen this minister shift, and I've seen the target audience really be like women. The target audience is women. It's always been women, but they're doubling down, right? And so I made a YouTube video just sharing my experience with the church and all the ways in which the church quite literally preys on women. Like, I cannot stress this enough, and particularly Black women. And it's a lot of Black women who are acknowledging this now. We're coming out, we're having the conversations. We're not really sure where to go because we're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right? Like, we understand that we have principles. There are some foundational truths in the practice of Christianity, because it does, afford you, moral characteristics, internal goods, you know what I mean? A sense of peace of mind, hope, in times of trouble, and just living the Black experience. I would say that hope is always pretty good to have, And so anyway, I don't know where I was going with this. But I wanted to talk about Black men and Black regression, right? It's unfortunate because I think with these conversations, anybody who has this conversation, right, who has these conversations, Black women specifically, not only are we trying to be mindful of the language, right, we are aware we have brothers, we have cousins, we have fathers, we have people in our lives who are doing the work, who have done the work, who have been stand-up guys, who, but then we have some who haven't been, you know what I mean? And so we always kind of have to check that bias, right? We have little cousins, rather, I think this is a better example. We have little cousins, we have sons, you know what I mean, that we're raising, kids that are growing up around us, you know what I mean? And, we don't want to project that narrative onto them, right? To say, oh, Black men ain't this, Black men ain't that, you know what I mean? Black men are, you know what I mean? So we want to be mindful not to project that onto them, but we also have to acknowledge what's going on here and what is taking place and what has been consistent within the Black community in terms of wealth and regression. So one of the things I always recommend for Black History Month, and when I say always, I mean as in 2023 on my Lemons 8 page, I recommended that for Black History Month, one of the most necessary reads, I think this should be something that everybody needs to read in Africana Studies, is the Willie Lynch letter. Like, that book it's very short, but it is so to the point in where we are today. And it's almost so shocking because it is everything that was written and planned, you can very easily streamline it from past tense to modern day. It's crazy. But I think that's a required reading. That's a required reading. And so anyway, the number that has been done on Black men is crazy, right? We're aware that with Black women, Black women are educated. So Black women are advocating for Black women. Black women are speaking out about their experiences. We do our work as well, though, in regards to communal advocacy as well. But Black women have acknowledged, the fact that we were hypersexualized, right? We acknowledge that. We can see that in our culture. We critique it when it shows up in our culture. We, argue that we are more than our bodies, right? We advocate for our bodies and for autonomy over our bodies and all the things, all the things. And that's just one aspect of the work of the Willie Lynch letter and the work that has been done within the Black female psyche. But that's just one example. But with Black men, unfortunately, I don't think that their work has ever been done successfully. I don't think that anyone has been able to communicate with Black men in a way to radicalize them to the ways in which they have been conditioned to be, the ways in which they have been conditioned to live, and how that behavior shows up in their lives today, right? And so what you have is a bunch of people who are essentially ignorant, and they're repeating cycles and committing damage and destruction in their own communities, right? So you no longer need white people to do it because most Black men are doing it. And you don't realize how destructive it is because it's so normalized, right? We can look at single mothers and we say, oh my God, all of these single women with children, they are the exact problem, okay? They are the problem. They are the byproduct of everything that is dysfunctional with the Black race, right? They got these freaking kids out here. They're just out here having all these babies, right? And we ignore the fact that a woman can't get pregnant without a man, right? You need sperm, right? And so when you take a look at the full picture, right, and you don't just cut off you don't just cut off the causation of a thing, right? I'm sorry, the effect of a thing, but you look at the causation, right? It very easily you can say, oh my God, right? Black men have been doing this thing repetitively where it is going, the Bible talks about this too. And it's crazy because it's like, it talks about, these are the type of men that creep into the houses of silly women and take them, what is it? These are the lives of men who creep into the houses of silly women laden with sin or something like that, but anyway, that was a bad reference because I don't know the verse, but yeah. It's like, simply put, I want to try to be thorough and conscious, but I also just kind of want to be real with you guys. Like, we can very easily see this. And what happens with Black women, with this being the byproduct, single mothers and so forth, Black women start to internalize this, right? So for example, you've been raised right. Okay, let's just say this. As a Black woman, you've been raised right. You've done all the right things. You ain't out here loosey-goosey. You know what I mean? Like, you're holding yourself to a high standard. You're doing things the quote-unquote right way. Perhaps you've grown up in the church, right? You may have even waited, all these different things. And you find yourself on the other side with the single mothers, right? And so then you look at other Black women who are coming up, right? You get these younger generation of women, or women who maybe not just be coming up per se, but just other women who maybe don't have children, right? And so what you start to think when you see your baby daddy, the man who has literally impregnated you and altered your life, you then see him move on. And you see this woman who doesn't have kids, and you start to think, oh my gosh, she's better than me, right? And she may even think she's better than you. Matter of fact, she definitely thinks she's better than you. I'm telling you what I know. She thinks she's better than you, right? And so you're in this weird place where it's like, you start to compete with other Black women because you feel like there's something that you're missing, right? Not realizing that with this man who is psychologically enslaved, right? Like he's in captivity. You know what I mean? So this is just a game for him. You know what I mean? This is just a game for him. This is just a way for him to feel some type of validation. And where is he getting that idea from? Like, where do men, and where do Black men specifically, get this idea that in order to be seen as a man, in order to be considered competent, in order to be worthy of the title of masculinity, right, or to model masculinity, is to take down as many women as he can? Where does he get that from? Well, where do most Black men get their information from, right? They're not getting it from the institutions. They're not getting it from independent study, right? They're getting it from the media. Right? It's very easy to control them, and even still to this day, because of the lack of literacy. Right? And so when you say, well, why do Black men have a lack of literacy? Well, because of the institutions and the ways in which they're socialized, right? And so you say, well, why is that? Well, you say slavery, systemic racism, you know what I mean? As well as social conditioning and environmental factors, right? So Black men are typically bullied by other Black men, for being smart. And that's just kind of like the regression of like the Black nerd. Today, we can see this intellectual debate and competitiveness on TikTok, right? I questioned in the community sector on my YouTube whether or not intellectualism was something that was kind of being seen as whether or not we were testing intellectualism in terms of like natural selection for future fitness, right? And what I mean by that was a mouthful, definitely a word salad. But what I mean by that is that we know that as human beings, we have a way of evolving, right? And in science, whenever species are evolving, the species will typically kill off the weaker ones, right? The weaker ones will die down. The stronger, it's survival of the fittest, okay? This is basic biology, right? Survival of the fittest, natural selection, okay? And so what I mean by that from a scientific standpoint is like when you look at modern day society, we no longer need physical fitness, right? This is why you're hearing about the increase in, you're hearing about the increase in obesity, but the solution is modern medicine practices, right? The advancement of modern medicine practices, which would be Ozempic, right? So there's a solution for that. And then in terms of the ways in which we are now socialized, right? The ways in which human beings have kind of evolved in the ways in which we socialize, it is through social media. And so if we're constantly being online, we do need to have some level of quote unquote fitness, right? To be able to vet the sources and engage with the media in a way that is productive, in a way that, I don't know, it's evolutionary, right? And I think the way for that to be would be through some level of intelligence. And so I think that's kind of what we're kind of seeing today, why people are so intellectually competitive online. But those are just my thoughts. And so, yeah. Yeah. And so I just lost my train of thought, but I might come back to that, but I'll pause there. And so anyway, you guys, I'm sorry, I just went on a whole tangent. But anyway, the reality is that Black men are creating broken homes, And it's not just single mothers that are facing the brunt of this. It's the generation of the young males who grow up right after these black men. And then it's just a cycle because nobody's a stand-up, right? I always say, everybody ain't going to be a millionaire, but everybody can be a stand-up. I know we're kind of ending on a MLK type speech, hope to the people, but I'm serious. It's really bad out here, and it's something that is so incredibly disgraceful, but it is also something that is so incredibly normalized. It's so deeply embedded in our roots and in our culture that this is the foundation. This is the foundation that is constantly nurtured within the lives of so many black men. It's a shame, but this is the truth, and so what happens is you have a bunch of men out here who, go get with all these different women, have all these different children, decide they want something new. They want to look at something different. They want to go and do that. You know what I mean? And so they get with another woman, same thing. You know what I mean? The moment that she demands that he be a man, the moment that she demands a little bit more respect from a brother, you know what I mean? Then, he's on to the next, and then it's just this cycle of women being used, women being, when I say turned out, I mean, in the sense that, our innocence. Let's talk about it. You know what I mean? Why do you think black women are the way they are? Because black women don't get that right to be protected as women. Why? Because our men are predatory. And I don't want to say that as a matter of fact, and I don't want to say that as a general statement, but on average, yes. Why are they predatory? Because they're socialized to be that way. Are they inherently predatory? No. Are black men inherently bad? No. Are they inherently criminals? No. Are they inherently ignorant? No. They are very much capable of the very things that we're capable of. You know what I mean? We've seen it done before. But when you start talking about the vast majority versus that small minority, the numbers are incredibly disproportionate. And that's the byproduct of our community. And so you never really get to get ahead. Why? Because, when you have children, you're doing it all on your own. You don't really have a village. You have to protect the children. And if you, God forbid, you can't protect the children, then the children grow up and they experience abuse, right? We know that there's very real implications for vulnerable youth, right? And so there's that, right? And then, if you are a male and you're just sowing your wild oats, and it's generational cycles of poverty. The courts are then brought into the situation. The child is 18 years of age, till the child is 18 years of age, and so what are we talking about? There is no progress, right? And then, you decide you want something else. So then you move on to the next woman. There's all this chaos. Just think of all of this, right? On top of child rearing. So 18 years of child rearing, you're moving on to these different women. You're adding more and more years of child rearing to your life. You're adding more and more years of just destruction. And by the time you finally get out of all of this chaos that you've created for yourself, right? Now here you are in your 50s, right? And what are you tasked with, right? Industrial working. You're working at Amazon warehouse. You know what I mean? Instead of building wealth, instead of perhaps even starting a business or having some type of idea that you could pursue, your God-given gift, okay? Something, purpose, something. Even being able to pour into your children and be a family man and to say, hey, this is how a man is supposed to be. Let's do this differently. You know what I mean? Let me at least make this right in my area. Like I said, everybody ain't going to be a millionaire, but everybody could be a stand-up. You know what I mean? Now, here you are wallowing in pity. And you got alcoholism, you got homelessness, you're faced with all these different things because you never went to school, right? You jumped off the porch and the first thing you started doing was making babies and creating broken homes. And so, boom. Now your kids grow up without a father, or a piss poor one at that, because you don't know anything, right? You've been playing games and slanging since you was 18. You never grew up. You never really, so the arguments that a daddy should be in the house are refutable, right? I mean, the thing about that is like a man is more than a presence. Children can have a male presence at school. And it's not to say that, we have to be mindful of that, right? Like, I'm not saying that should be the implication, right? Because we understand that, again, men are predatory. So that's not what we're saying. But what I'm saying is that a father is more than a presence. What good is it to be around a child and you can't teach the child anything. You can't pour into the child. And I also believe that this is exactly why when men create these families and things get real, they have to essentially run and hide. They have to either go hide in another woman's bosom, or they have to, go out in the world and find some other sense of validation because, well, you realize that you just brought a child into this life, and you have nothing to give this child. You don't know anything. You haven't learned anything. And instead of you saying, now is the time to prioritize that, what are you doing? You're out, you're still repeating the same cycles, right? And really that deep-seated need for validation that so many Black men have, it comes from the psychological conditioning that is American society. Black men have refused to do the work of deconstructing their minds, okay? Freeing themselves from what has been presented to them in American society. And that's a work that no Black woman should have to do because that we can't do the work of a man. You know what I mean? That's crazy, but it's true. It's psychological conditioning. It's propaganda, it's marketing and it's continuous. Right. And so if you grow up and you don't have a father figure, which again, most people don't. Okay, let's talk about it. Right. Let's talk about it. And it's not because of your mother. Right. Women are women. And I know, and when I talk about this a lot, when I say women are women, I know that sounds like such a blanket statement, but hear me when I say that, right? Only Black women are not really given the opportunity to be women and to be afforded motherhood and womanhood, right? You have to understand that no woman wants to bore a child and then go out into the world on her own. Who would sign up for that? We're not even created for that. You know what I mean? And so you have to understand that. And so because Black men haven't done the work, it's repetitive. And the crazy thing is, in many ways, they're awarded for this behavior. There are rewards for degrading and disrespecting the Black woman. Typically, there are no rewards for being a good guy. You don't get that level of that validation, that external validation all the time. Maybe, if it's performative, but I mean, when you're really living it and you're living a life of integrity, it's pretty boring, right? Spotlight's not on you, buddy. You know what I mean? And so, you just have a lot of people out here who don't know who they are. And why are they lacking identity? Because they're lacking fathers. And when will that ever change? I don't know. But I just told you the lifestyle and the life trajectory of men who have these broken homes. That's exactly what it becomes. It's not a story that is heroic, right? It's not triumphant. It's not an underdog story to where the single father, like the whole Pursuit of Happiness story, which was totally fabricated, by the way. It's not that. That's not how it works. You don't go out in the world and mess your life up to that extent and make all these very irresponsible choices and think you're going to have a story of redemption. You have nothing coming your way but bad luck and drama and headaches for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? It's not The Shy with Jacob Lattimore. And you know what I mean? He's got this redemption story. He gets married to Keisha. They get a house. No, it's not like that at all. That is you are more consumed to a lifestyle of poverty. And I know we don't like to talk about it, but it's true. You look at some of the homeless men out here and it's not always because of, circumstances. A lot of men out here are homeless. You see these guys on the corner and things like that. It's because they've burned every freaking bridge in their lives. And I know we don't like to talk about that. We like to be, we would like to look at the poor and we hold that space for them, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But please understand that a lot of times people are where they are because of the choices that they made. And if you are a young man and nobody has ever taught you about the choices that you make in life and the consequences of those choices, then what do you think you're going to do? You're going to live your life as such, as reckless as you can possibly be. You'll never hold yourself to anything, right? There's really something in that iron sharpening iron. And there's really something in being a person who has like morals, right? And values instilled in you, and you have character, because character says, I can't go that far. I'm not going to go outside these lines. This is where I draw the line. You know what I mean? But we don't have that. What do you have? You have someone who has no walls, right? City with no walls. Somebody who is boundless, who will do whatever, whenever, and so forth. And so that's what you have. And who does whatever they want, whenever they want? Children. Children are the only people who can do whatever they want when they want. And even still, children get older and learn a little bit of, rules and regulations, right? They have boundaries, they're grounded, and things like that. But I talked about this. I said, that's the thing about being a single mother, raising sons. Sometimes, hey, you can't teach them how to be a man. If you maybe have a father figure in your life, or you have men around you, you might be able to pour into him in that way. You know what I mean? You might be able to give to him in that way, and kind of model a little bit of that behavior. But if you don't have that, then only thing you can give your son is love, right? And undeserved praise a lot of times to build his self-esteem, right? And I think that's just the thing. And so when the work of the esteem within Black men is never done, why is it never done? Well, because most Black men are not going to school to be scholars to study Black male psychology, right? Most Black men are going to the league, or so they think. Right. I was just listening to Gene Demby in NPR. He brought on a previous NFL player who didn't make it to the league. And they started talking about things that, when it comes to college football, how these athletes aren't even able to pick their own majors because it will interfere with their practice, right? With them practicing football. And so how even if they don't make it to the league, they're shortchanged on both sides because one, they spent their entire lives, their entire collegiate years dedicated to these universities, who in turn, obviously pay for their football scholarships, but they don't even get the same collegiate experience as everybody else. They don't even get to pick and select their coursework, right? That's why they do typically have very stupid majors, essentially, like criminal justice. And when I speak about this, I know I'm speaking as a matter of fact, but please understand that I have so much empathy for these guys. That's a conversation for another day, because that's just an injustice. Okay. That's not even a matter of like poor choices. And you know what I mean? Like, no, like really I have so much empathy for guys, and that's been their experience. And even the guys who do make it to the NFL and that's their experience, like that's crazy. You give up so much for this. Anyway, let me not get off track, but yeah. And so the self-esteem in Black men is very low. The self-regard is almost non-existent. There are no bounds within the lifestyles of Black men. It's incredibly dangerous. And it's the exact reason why we're not really able to build wealth. And it's the exact same reason why we're not really able to build much of anything, right? The internal struggles, the psychological struggles are the things that Black men face, and they go undealt with. They go unnoticed, right? And again, you have a bunch of men who, who don't take the time to kind of tend to that, even if it's something they've overcome. Black men are individualistic in the ways in which they go about things. Now, there are some organizations that do, I know AA Wellness is one. That's the only one I know. So I know that there are males who are out there doing that work, but a lot of times it's not anything by widespread. I do think something I always try to be mindful of is the blind spots in terms of like geography. So geographically, I know that people in the South, Black people in the South, are a little bit more community oriented, right? So there might be more resources for Black men down there. I feel like when you talk about marriages and prosperity and guidance and mentorship programs and resources and all those different things, it is available and it is out there. So that's why I said I'm not necessarily speaking for everybody, right? Because I know that there are people out there that is doing that work, but I'm in a very poor city that is predominantly Black, and it's really bad. And I know that most cities, most states have cities that exist where there's a high population of African Americans, and there's ignorance, and there is this that I'm talking about right now. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. But I think I just needed to come on and kind of address that because, it's regressive, and we have to just ask ourselves, like, when do we make the change? When do we take a stance to do something different? I'm not saying one man can change the world, but I mean, come on, somebody got to try. Somebody got to try, because until then, what are we going to have? What are we living in? Tupac prophecy, race of babies. Okay. Race of babies that hate the ladies who make the babies. Okay. What are we talking about? So I'm going to go ahead and end there. These are conscious conversations. They're a little hard to have, but it is just the truth, honey. I'm sorry. If you are a Black man and you stand outside of this, you can't stand on the sidelines. You got to get a sense of purpose, and you got to get in there. You got to do that work. You got to do the work. You got to help your people. We ain't free until we all free. Happy Black History Month. Peace.